thank you for joining us this evening then for our How to Prepare for the SQE2 After the LPC webinar. So we put on this session just because we've had a number of inquiries coming through from people in this sort of situation, and we're just quite keen to have this session to try and sort of directly answer your queries and support you how we can for those in that situation, really. So the session will be recorded, and we will be sending over the slides and a copy of the recording to all attendees. Closed captions have been enabled, so if you need to access that, you should be able to. And please do use the chat function on here to ask any questions that you have. We'll be reviewing that throughout the webinar, but also we'll make sure we allow for plenty of questions at the end as well for anything else that you think of whilst we are going through the session. So some introductions then. So my name is Nicola Gordge. I am the Student Recruitment Manager here at the College of Legal Practice. I oversee the sort of journey of our prospective students from initial interest to signing up to a programme of study with the college. If you call or email, it'll be normally myself or the student recruitment officer here who will be happy to assist you with any questions that you have. And I'm joined this evening by our CEO, Dr Giles Proctor. Giles, if you'd like to introduce yourself as well.
Thank you, Nicola. Good evening, everyone. Yes, I'm Giles. As Nicola says, I'm the current head of the college. In a previous life, I was a practicing commercial lawyer who then moved into teaching and particularly working with law firms, devising training schemes for young lawyers and qualified lawyers as well. And when I moved into the sort of higher education sector, I became head of various law schools and ran quite a few LPC courses, GDLs, etc. And then I got involved with Kaplan. I was head of Kaplan Law School at the time when they were working with the SRA, the regulator, to devise the new SQE exam. And we worked on the basis of that exam with Kaplan and the SRA for a couple of years. So my interest really sort of spans both the LPC, which I've had first-hand experience of, but also the change between that and particularly moving to SQE2, as some, if not all of you, will be doing tonight. So I'm here with Nicola to hopefully give you a few tips and tricks. Thank you, Nicola.
Thanks, Giles. So just to briefly recap what we'll be hopefully covering for you this evening then. So I'll give a bit of an overview of who we are here at the College of Legal Practice. We'll be talking about the key differences between the LPC route and the new SQE route to qualify as a solicitor. We'll cover what the SQE2 assessments actually involve, and then the key considerations for taking the SQE2 in that scenario of having taken the LPC rather than SQE1. And then some tips on the best way to prepare really effectively for taking the SQE2. And as I said, obviously here to answer any questions that you do have as well. So then, for those of you who don't know, we are a fully online postgraduate law school, and we are built for delivering our courses online as well. So we specialise in SQE preparation. Our parent company, the College of Law, are leaders in legal education in Australia. So we are very experienced in delivering digital learning. We're all about accessible and affordable legal education. Traditionally, legal practice has been known for being a profession with many barriers to entry, so we do our bit to eliminate that by offering our courses at an affordable price. We also like to facilitate access through our personal and targeted individual support, where students get access to high levels of one-to-one tutor supervision. And we also ensure we facilitate an inclusive learning environment through our learning and teaching, and can make reasonable adjustments for those that need it, giving everyone an opportunity to get the most out of their learning. You'll see there's a number of different logos on the screen there.
Nicola, sorry to interrupt. I can't see the slides. I wonder if the ladies and gentlemen can as well.
Oh, thank you.
It may be my view. It's worth double checking now, I think.
Yeah, could anyone just confirm in the chat, please, if you can see my
all good
slides?
That's great. Okay, Nicola, it must be my view then. Do crack
Okay,
on.
panic over. Thank you for confirming there.
Sorry, I've got them now. Thank you.
Okay, just bear with me one moment. Let me just pop over to that screen. Lovely. Yes, I was just saying there's a number of logos on the screen there, which are firms that we work with to provide SQE preparation for them. And also we do partner with a number of universities as well, where we offer the SQE parts of their master's programmes as well. And the logo for the office for students as well, as we are accredited through them. So I will hand you over to Giles then, who's going to talk to you about the comparisons of the two routes.
Cheers, Nicola. Thank you very much indeed. And good evening, everyone. So just to introduce this next section of the talk, what I'm going to do is highlight common differences between the LPC route and the SQE route, and hopefully focus for you on how best you can adjust from the LPC background you've got to the SQE, so you can use your LPC knowledge to best advantage on SQE2. So you can see on this slide the two routes expressed simply side by side. Now, the LPC route on the left of the slide effectively adds on the vocational training element to your academic LLB or GDL. And the LPC's purpose was to prepare you for the first day of a training contract. And then after the training contract is completed, once you've met the suitability requirements from the SRA, you'll be admitted to the role. Now, it's most likely admission will be approximately 2 years after you've started your training contract, and there's a linear progression from studying on the LLB GDL through the LPC, doing your training contract, and then being admitted. Now, the SQE takes a slightly different approach. The qualification, as you can see on the side, has the 4 elements. However, it's not necessarily a linear progression through the elements. So firstly, you just need a degree to start on your journey to qualification. You no longer necessarily needs to be a law degree. Technically, I think most people are advised that having a background in the legal concepts through an LLB or GDL is probably vital to passing the next stage, which is those 2 exams we've marked, SQE1 and SQE2. Those are 2 national exams, ones that you probably already are very familiar with. And if you've just done and passed an LPC, of course, you have the route to just take SQE2, which is going to be the main focus of what we talk about tonight. Now, the preparation for those exams can be framed in a number of ways, either through a preparation course similar in length to the LPC, as was, so perhaps 1 year or even 2-year part-time, or for SQE particularly, we're seeing the growth of a variety of part-time modes. After those 2 elements of the qualification, you also need 2 years qualifying work experience, or QWE, and that's the flexible element here, because unlike the training contract, which you would do usually 99% of the time after your LPC course, you can obtain your qualifying work experience either before, during, or after you take the SQE exam or examinations. So there's an element of flexibility there as to when you choose to get these 4 elements under your belt to qualify. And finally, of course, under the SQE, you present yourself for admission, provided again you meet those suitability requirements. There is therefore much more flexibility in the SQE route in terms of the order in which you can obtain the elements you need. Moving on, if we may, to the next slide, there's therefore this point to focus on, which is about the SQE preparing you for the first day of qualification, which is unlike the LPC. So the approach to the application for legal knowledge that you gained is very different within the SQE as opposed to the LPC. And I'll talk a little bit here, therefore, about the syllabus. So the syllabus of the LPC, compulsory subjects, the electives you might choose, plus the skills. You add that to the syllabus of your degree or GDL, and that makes up the entire syllabus of the new SQE. That is around 13 practice areas. So what you learned on the LPC in terms of compulsory subjects, business, property, civil lit, crim lit, wills and probate, and the electives you did are very relevant, as is the knowledge gained from your foundation subjects, whether you did them on the LLB or even the GDL. However, What the SQE2 is assessed on is 50% on skills and 50% on legal knowledge. So in order to complete the SQE2 successfully, you're asked to have a general understanding of all those 13 practice areas. And those are all contained, of course, in the SQE1 syllabus. Now, so as an ex-LPC student, you are drawing on your knowledge from the LPC, certainly, but also you're having to reach back further into your law degree or GDL. So the currency of your knowledge to have a successful go at SQE2 is very important. So if you've done your LPC a little time ago, then it might be slightly more difficult for you to recall the key areas of law in relation to business law and practice, criminal law, civil lit and procedure, property law, etc., than if you've done it very, very recently, or if you've done the SQE1. Also, the expectation of the SQE syllabus is that you're familiar with legal principles from the law subject areas, rather than, as sometimes taught on some of the subjects in the LPC, detailed statute, because you're not going to be examined on a particular section or sections. You are going to be asked to draw out on the SQE2 general principles when you are practicing the particular skill. I'm going to outline those skills in a moment for you and just walk you through them. So I suppose the key message is you might need to take on some extra time with prep, reminding yourself of those foundation subjects you did from the GDL or LLB to bring yourself up to speed, and also to look very closely at what law you covered on your LPC, because again, the expectation of how you use that knowledge is slightly different. Moving on to the third bullet on the slide, you will find the course structure of any SQE program to be different from an LPC program. Also, there's an expectation will be you'll have the underpinning knowledge from that syllabus I've talked about, those 13 subjects, at your fingertips. So there'll probably be less time on your SQE2 given to law recap and more on learning and executing the 6 skills when preparing for the SQE2 examination. Now, I suppose 2 things to finish with on this. In terms of our provision, I'm sure the providers do this, we will flag during our SQE2 program where you have to go back to particular SQE1 material. So we provide for you with the SQE2 program our SQE1 materials, access to those, because we think it's only fair that at relevant points we refer you back to the law so you're able to bring that law into the practice of the skill. The second thing to be careful of is the assessment design, of course, is very different in the SQE2 from the LPC. Yes, you did skills on the LPC, but SQE2, what you'll find, the assessment design is very, very focused on practicing elements of the skill. So on our course, we will break down the skill for you into effectively what we call drills and bits of the skill one by one. And as you build them up, and in those builds, we will then make sure by the end of the practice that you've covered all the elements of the skill. And I'll come on to a little bit about how you make sure you do that to best effect when it comes to the exam. So there are some key differences there between the LPC and the SQE, the treatment according to the syllabus of the knowledge, the course structure you might run into, and also ultimately the assessment design you're looking at when you're studying SQE2, as opposed to what you did on the LPC. So let's just briefly move on, if we may, to the outline of the SQE2 assessment test. Now, I'm not going to run through these in great detail because I'm sure if you've come on this webinar, you're already familiar with the outline. Practice areas, as you can see on the left-hand side of the slide, are those you're familiar with from the LPC. What I would also remind you of, however, that you do need recall of the underlying principles in contract tort, criminal trusts, etc. Those are needed. So I think it's a little bit disingenuous of the SQE2 syllabus to sort of point out these practice areas when actually you really need most of the underpinning law, which of course, had you come that route, you would have covered in SQE1, but you will have covered on your LLB or GDL. It's also worth reflecting that those skills that they set out on the slide will be examined both online, those written skills. Those are assessed over 3 half days, the sort of 12 written skills assessments covering the relevant skills, and you'll be assessed in person for the oral skills. Therefore, if you're currently situated outside the UK, you need to look ahead when you're doing your SQE2 to plan for travel to the SQE to do your SQE2 assessment centre, and they're held in Cardiff, Manchester, London, and Birmingham for your oral assessment, 2 half days. And those definitely just a little bit of planning required to do that. Also, those assessment dates 4 times a year, so you can choose your date. But as I'll say later, if you find you're not quite ready for the assessment, it's wise to actually move on to a further date. Please be aware that that fee that is in front of you is charged for each set of SQE2 exams. So if you resit the SQE2 examination, you will be asked to pay the fee again. And I have to say the SRA have increased the fee annually over the last 3 years. And that fee is payable to Kaplan, who run the assessment for the SRA. That fee is separate from any tuition fee that you might pay to a course provider. Now, if we look at those legal skills, I have to say the SQE2 as an exam and the way it's devised is a really, really well set up exam. It focuses on the central skills, the key for your future legal career. I think the syllabus is a good one. It gives you the skills you need. However, what we do point out to all our students who are studying the SQE2, particularly those who are working as paralegals or in a firm already, you need to take care to follow the exam format, what the assessments call a rubric of the Kaplan assessments. The Kaplan organisation, as I say, running the assessment for the SRA. There's a particular format and time limit to each particular assessment, which you need to pay attention to. And what we do on our course is make sure you're very quickly attuned to the fact that, for example, with legal research, you only have an hour and you have to handle various source materials they give to you. And that's interesting because for the most part, these exams are closed book exams. So the only material allowed will be that supplied for the exam itself. The example of legal research I've just given you, they'll give you about 30 pages or so of text from various sources, some of which will be relevant to what you're having to research and some of which will be irrelevant. Okay. I suppose one final thing before we move off this slide is to highlight to you that you'll be marked across your 16 stations and you're assessed against various levels. This detail is all on the SQE2 website for the SRA if you want to look at it. The key thing is in order to pass SQE2, you must obtain the overall pass mark for SQE2 across the 16 exams. You'll receive your results about 14, 16 weeks after the actual sitting. And if you fail, as the pass mark is based on your overall performance across all assessments, you'll resit the entire SQE2. And remember, in the wider picture, you've got 3 attempts to pass the exams within the 6-year period. Okay. Nicola, I'm just going to pause there for a moment before I do my final pitch about looking at key considerations. Are there any questions come up yet?
We haven't had any questions through as yet, Giles.
Okay, no problem at all. I'll carry on and I'll just deal with the sort of key considerations on the next slide, if I may. So, drawing together our experience so far of seeing LPC students come through the LPC and then go on to the SQE2 exam, I suppose there's 4 or 5 things that we would say are sort of very important to think about, either before you commence this route or if you're already on this route, how to increase your chances of success. So firstly, if you're thinking about this route, think about the currency of your LPC. So how long is it since you took your LPC? And also take into account how long it was also before that you did your degree. Simply because, as I said before, the SQE2 examination really requires you to have the legal principles at your fingertips for those policy, practice and procedure courses, but also for the underlying foundation courses. So it may be well worthwhile asking your SQE2 provider if you can have access to their SQE1 materials to refresh your understanding of legal principle. We provide that, I'm sure the providers do as well. Our materials are available for 14 months after you start the SQE2 course. So you'll be constantly directed through our course to look back at nuggets of legal principle to help you in a particular stage when you're practicing the build of a skill or a particular element of the skill. Okay. Remember, your LPC might have been taught in quite a different way from SQE1. So if you haven't had as much a focus on legal principle, it's worth having access to some SQE1 materials. Okay. Secondly, check what electives, or remember what electives you've done on the SQE, on the LPC, and think about those areas on the SQE syllabus. It might be you've covered some electives that are really helpful for the SQE2 syllabus. If not, and if there's clear gaps in your knowledge, again, how do you attend to that? Make sure you're ready to cover those relevant areas of law. Thirdly, you'll already be aware of the key legal principles from the compulsory subjects and the lectures on the LPC and your law degree. So it's not to be downhearted, it's just to remind yourself the importance of having those firmly in your grasp. So again, thinking about time to refresh your understanding from those foundation subjects that you did, whether GDL or LLB, is really, really very, very important. Okay. Now, this point about the appropriate course for studying SQE2, and this partly links into my previous point that if you are rusty on some of the law, or you feel that you haven't studied for a while, it's going to take you a while to get up to speed, do think about actually choosing a part-time option to study SQE2. So, for example, we run a 20-week part-time and a 40-week extended part-time, where the hours of study are for the 20-week about 15 hours a week and for the 40-week about 7 hours a week, particularly if you're working at the same time as taking your SQE2. But also, if you're finding you're probably going to take a little longer to get yourself up to speed with the law, because, again, going back to this point, the exam is assessed 50% skills, your performance of the skill, and 50% law. So you do need to be solid in both areas, the performance of the skill, but also the understanding of the legal principle that underpins the skill. And I suppose that leads into my final point, which is ensuring that you are assessment ready. So you're not looking to spend £2,900 as a Kaplan assessment fee and then not have a very good chance of passing the SQE2. Now, the SQE2 pass rates are very good. They are up into the high 70s, even the early 80%. And that speaks to a cohort who have got the law under their belt from SQE1 or are experienced working in practice already. Okay, so I think it's very important that you are talking to your provider through your SQE2 course to consider whether you are ready for the examination. What we do on our course, I'm sure others do this, is we'll feedback. We have what's called practice and feedback sessions with our students, where you will go through elements of the skill with a tutor. And what we can then do is give you practice mock assessments. You take those assessments and we grade them using the format that the actual examiners, when you're doing your written or your oral skills, will use. So we can give you a fairly accurate representation of where you are on the skills and where you are on the law. And with all that information, we will at some point during the course feed back to you towards the end whether we think we're ready to take the SQE2, because we think it's quite reassuring either to know you're on the right track or to know if for whatever reason you're not hitting the percentage of marks you need to hit to get through the exam. So we always say, if you are wanting to have an objective conversation about your marks and grades and where you are for the exam, we are very happy to have that. We offer that to all our students, so we think it's quite a wise thing to have, because since the SQE2 assessments run every 3 months, and you may or may not also have a firm who are sponsoring you for the exams, it may be worthwhile in delaying for 3 or so months to the next exam sitting in order to make yourself even more ready for the exam. Okay, so those are just some thoughts around the considerations we've looked at in terms of differences between backgrounds in LPC and coming to do the SQE2. Nicola, I'm going to pause there. I've noticed we've had some action on the chat.
We've had a few questions come through, Giles. So first question, what happens after 3 unsuccessful attempts?
So what happens is your 6-year period, you have a 6-year period. If you're just doing the SQE2, that 6-year period will start when you start your when you do your SQE2 exam, your first one. So you have 3 attempts, then you have to wait for your 6-year period to expire before you can start to cycle again and resubmit for another SQE2 examination. That is, I hope, very unlikely, but that's the technical position. You have a 6-year window to pass if you're taking them both your SQE exams, or if you're just taking SQE2 to pass your SQE2.
Thank you. And then there's a question about checking on the exemption, really. So someone who had studied an LB and then gone on to LPC, how can they check that? And can we advise on it?
No, we would not advise, simply because the SRA are the ones who will advise you on your exemption and your ability to take the SQE2 route. And they have a list, which they're developing, to be honest, all the time, of jurisdictions, if you're from outside the UK, from which you can check whether you have an exemption can come in. And then you'll be doing SQE1. If you've done your LPC, then the route is to take your SQE2. So it's best to clarify that by contacting the SRA directly. Make sure you're going to go on the correct route for your circumstances.
And there is a page on the SRA's website where it does confirm how you can gain the exemption through the.
Oh, there is. There's and there is just simple mechanics.
And I was going to say I can add that link to the follow-up email.
I think it'll be most helpful.
Send out tomorrow. But if in doubt, you can directly contact the SRA as well to ask a direct question to them. Lovely. Okay. So another question. I understand to get the SQE1 materials, it's granted once someone enrolls onto the SQE2 preparation course. What can someone do to sort of familiarise themselves?
I think what you would do, and what we've seen some of our students do, is with access to the SQE materials, you also have access in each of the units of SQE1 to multiple choice questions. One of the best ways to quickly brush up and check your understanding of basic principles to do the multiple choice questions within each of the units for SQE1. There's 10 of them in each unit. It's about 120 units. Now, you won't cover those all while you're doing SQE2, but you will want to be able to decide whether you are strong in your dispute resolution, whether you're strong in your business law and practice. Are there any areas where you might want to spend a little more time checking through the law? And again, while you're on the SQE2 course, you will have access to all the materials, so you can spend a little more time accessing and targeting those particular areas.
Thank you. Okay, a few more have just come through. What options and advice is there for someone self-studying? And is that recommended for recent LPC?
I think in terms of self-studying for SQE2, what that means is you'll have presumably materials you'll have purchased from a provider or providers, which you'll be working through yourself. I think the key thing about self-study is obviously having the discipline to cover the materials, but with a skills exam, particularly having some opportunity to study that skill. Now, whichever provider you're self-studying with, they may have self-study examples of skills which you can practice on your own. But it is helpful at some point to involve someone who may play the client in a particular situation, or may give you a chance to practice your oral skills with once you feel confident. So I think it's whatever materials you've got, sticking to a program of study, making sure you've built all the skills up so you can practice the full element of skill. And if you are self-studying and you haven't got a tutor from a provider helping you, making sure that you have looked at the rubric. So what Kaplan say about each examiners, how long they are, what you have to do in that examination, what's expected of you, so that when you come to the examination, having done your self-study, you're familiar with the format. And you can go on to the Kaplan website and have a look at sample questions for each of the SQE2 areas. I think that's really useful to do, especially if you're doing self-study, because that may not be something that comes through the own materials you've got. I hope that's helpful.
Lovely. And then a question about if with the practice areas, if you've already completed a particular area of study such as dispute resolution and property law, will you be exempt from taking them again?
No, there's no exemption. When you're coming to the SQE2, They reserve the right to examine the skills in the areas of law they cite to you. So mostly across those 3 or 4 we've discussed: business, property, dispute resolution, criminal. There's slight changes for certain skills. So you've got to be prepared to cover those 4 or 5 areas of law. They won't take out an area of law for you because you studied it before.
Lovely. And then there's a question about what's involved in the course. But so if I move on now and I'll go
Yes.
through
Nick, good idea.
what's
Yeah.
involved in our SQE2 preparation course, and hopefully that will help to answer some of those questions as well. But thank you for your questions, everyone. Please do keep them coming if there's anything else as well, and we'll come back to those shortly. So then let me talk you through a little bit about what's actually involved in the SQE2 preparation course that we offer then. So the course will take you through each of the SQE2's 6 legal skills in the 5 practice areas step by step. And there will then be examples, legal knowledge resources and self-practice assessments involved there as well. There's a huge bank of activities, as I said, skill practice and simulated assessments to access as and when you like. You have access to a hard copy and digital copy skills guides as well, and also have access, as we mentioned, to the SQE1 preparation course materials. And as Giles mentioned, you know, that's sort of threaded throughout as well, of where you can link back into to those materials to find greater information on a particular area as well. So you have support throughout from the supervisors here at the college. So there's seminars that are delivered on the skills across the different practice areas. You also have course information session throughout as well. And then a personal supervisor is allocated to you who you would meet with at regular points throughout the programme as well, so that they can really check in with you on how you're progressing and how you're engaging with the programme, and offer any additional support that you might need. As part of those sessions as well, we also offer an individual SQE ready review, and in that session, as Giles mentioned, the preparation courses are all sort of leading up to one particular exam period, but you don't have to take the exam at that point. You can decide to take it later if you feel you needed to. And so what the supervisor will assist you with is just giving you an overview of, okay, based on how you've been engaging in the programme, based on the sort of assessments that you've had, yes, I think you're probably ready to go ahead and take that next assessment, or actually you might be better off just having a longer revision period to then take one of the later dates exams. The good thing about the SQE2 is there are actually 4 exam points throughout the year. So, you know, if you're not quite ready, then it would be sort of 3 months' time, for example, until the next one that you could take. You do have, as Giles mentioned, 14 months continued access onto the learning platform to access all the materials after the end of the course date. So the assessments that are built in, then there's 16 skill practices with supervisor feedback and timed SQE practice assessments as well. Our course fees are £2,700, and we have a number of different durations that Giles mentioned, and I'll sort of go on to that a bit more in a moment as well, but we offer a 10, 20 or 40-week options. We do also offer an LLM in legal practice, which you can study the SQE2 under, but that does come along with the SQE1 as well. So if I just move on and I just show you some of our upcoming course start dates. So there is a 10-week one, which is our fastest SQE preparation course, SQE2 preparation course, and that really is, it is very full-time, it is very intense, and we wouldn't really recommend it if you are working at the same time, and if you are in that scenario of having perhaps had a bit of a gap in studies, that one perhaps isn't quite the right one for you. The 20-week options, we actually had one just start yesterday. It is still possible to join onto that one if you are very keen to do so, but otherwise the next 20-week course will start in February. And And then we will also have a 40-week one. The date is just being finalised, but it will be starting in March time as well. And that the 40-week one is our longer length course then. And then I'm just going to move on to some further tips for passing as well, and then we'll come back to any further questions that you might have. So I've got some top tips here that have actually been put together by Lisa Morrison, who is our SQE2 preparation course module leader. So I will share them with you. So Lisa suggested to make sure that you do fully engage with the course and with all the learning materials, but also all the practice activities that are offered to you as well. You know, they're there so that you really can test out those skills and that knowledge to see if you're at that right level to be then going ahead to take the assessments. Don't underestimate how good your functioning legal knowledge needs to be in the targeted practice areas. So in other words, don't assume that you can make up for gaps in your legal knowledge with marks from the skills that you have. You do really need to make sure that you are revising that alongside the SQE2 skills. Think about sort of studying smartly, you know, as you would with any course really, but make sure that you're thinking about, you know, little and often could be better than just completely putting something off until you have a large bank of time to dedicate. But if you are finding there's days where you're just not really studying effectively, you know, do be kind to yourself and give yourself a sort of a break and come back to it at a later date. As Giles mentioned earlier, get familiar with the assessment criteria for both the skills and the legal knowledge. So you're far more likely to score well against the SRA's assessment criteria if you do know what the criteria actually is. And Lisa said as well, you do you. So really make sure that you are concentrating on your own studies and your own preparation, and sort of filter out the different chatter if you can. So there's often a lot of noise online about and some good advice, but don't sort of get bogged down in negative stories about the SQE assessments. You know, if you do put the work in, you really can succeed, and that's where your focus really should be.
I think that's spot on, Nicola. I think SQE2 is a good news story. I think the SQE2 results are very encouraging. I think the point about regular study, I think the difference between the LPC from my experience in the SQE is the intensity. Sometimes the SQE2 can be very intense because you're both trying to master a skill, which you may have already covered a little bit on the LPC, which is an advantage. But you're trying to master the skill and you're trying to make sure you have the correct law as well. I think that's sometimes where the intensity comes in, that can strike you when you first start the SQE2 course, particularly if you're doing it in a full-time mode. If you're doing it in a part-time mode, you've got a little more time to adjust.
Brilliant. So yeah, let's move on to any further questions then. So I can see a question has come through about how we might compare with other providers, and the sort of suggestion that some law firms will put their students through other providers that are out there. As indicated at the start, I don't know if you saw that, but I just put on a small selection of icons from firms that we do actually work with. We certainly do have you know, large number of students that come to us as sponsored by a law firm. But Giles, do you have an opinion on how we compare to other providers?
I do, Nick. How long have I got? I suppose I should share my background in that. As I said at the beginning, I was head of Kaplan Law School when the SQE came in, and I was involved in designing it. And even then, the idea of an SQE that really gives access to the profession and really allows, as you can see from the flexibility we talked about, really allows people to study and have a work-life balance at the same time, and work around their own jobs and lives and career aspirations. And our aim was always, and we were a new provider, we never did an LPC at the college. We started purely as a professional SQE provider, so we only do postgraduate training. And so our focus has been really on how can we best help people pass these exams. So we don't have campuses, we don't have big buildings, we don't have lots of lights to turn on and off. We don't ask our students to come to any particular area or areas of the country. So we save quite a bit of money. to be fair, by not having that infrastructure. And we made the decision very early on, we would channel that into providing one-to-one support on our courses, because I think, and colleagues think, that this type of assessment, as well as SQE1, it's very different from what you've bumped into before. You need someone providing that information to you every week, your supervisor providing that practice and feedback. So that's our approach. It's not the approach of every provider. We chose to be virtual. We're purely virtual and purely online. We chose to be flexible. And that's our approach. So yeah, not every student will choose us, but hopefully the ones that do, and the firms we work with, from Reed Smith across the countryside to local firms to apprentices, etc., they have chosen a particular style of offering that we offer. And we like to be close to our students. And again, different choices mean that sometimes different providers have different models. So yeah, we're very pleased with where we are. We get good feedback on our courses, we get great feedback on the practice and feedback on the SQE2. And like all providers, we'd love to improve ourselves, and we work towards that, but we're very happy with what we've got, and increasing numbers of students are as well. So Nicola, there's a small snapshot.
Very well answered. Thank you, Giles. Lovely. Well, if anyone else has any further questions, please do feel free to ask them now. I will just pop up on the screen as well our contact details. But as I mentioned, my plan will be to send an email to everyone tomorrow with a copy of the slides and the recording, and some further useful links as well. But then please do come back with any further questions, anything else that you'd like to know from us.
Yes, and I think from both of us, I think good luck on the journey, wherever you are, whether you're making the decision to start it or whether you're halfway through it. Do give us a call, give our student services call team. Doesn't mean necessarily you're going to come to us, but hopefully we can give you some helpful advice on any issues that you need to sort out when you're studying. So really good to have your attention tonight, and thank you for your time.
Yeah, lovely. Thank you so much, everyone. And
thank you. Bye-bye.
We'll speak to you soon. Bye.